Warning. This podcast contains true stories that are not intended for those missing a sense of humor. Any resemblance to actual events or allegations are purely coincidental. Before listening, please relieve yourself, as possible adverse effects include spontaneous bladder leakage, mild hysteria, and sudden release of dopamine. Names have been changed to protect the innocent and guilty. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty, Karen. Welcome to Coding Consultant Confessions with Tony Elholmes, Stacy Buck, and Victoria Mole. Unfiltered, unedited, unapologetic. In this podcast, Tony, Stacy, and Victoria come together to share unique perspectives, engaging dialogue, entertaining commentary, and funny stories for those working in the healthcare industry. And now, here are your hosts, Tony, Stacy, and Victoria.
Welcome to another episode of Coding Consultant Confessions. I am Stacy Buck, your host for today's episode, and as always, I am joined by the amazing Victoria Mole and Tony Elholmes. You know, we all start out with an idea of what we want to do and where we want to go in life, but so often many of us end up going in different directions from what we planned and what we envisioned. And I think all of us, we try to make the best decisions, weighing all of our options, but sometimes we make a decision that doesn't quite work out the way that we thought, or life circumstances can steer us onto a very different path than what we actually had anticipated. But regardless of circumstance, hopefully one thing is true, that we learn from all of our experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And through our experiences, we do have the ability to learn what works for us and what does not. And of course, we're all familiar with the saying that hindsight is 20/20. And sometimes we come to realize that some of our biggest disappointments or unexpected things that occur in life actually lead us to our biggest successes. And then sometimes we also find out what we wanted for so long, or what we thought we wanted, might not actually be what we fully expected. When it finally arrives. So today in this episode, Tony, Victoria, and myself are going to go back to the past and share some lessons that we've learned during our career journey. So Victoria, I'm going to start with you. So thinking back on your career, if you had to start it all over again, what would you do differently? Or are you one of those rare people who are like, nope, I'm good. I wouldn't do anything any different. I am exactly where I want to be, and I made all the right decisions along the way.
No, definitely. There's some things I would have changed. I've spoken in the past about how originally when I was in high school, my mother told me to get into medical coding, and I was like, nope, not doing it. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to college for web design. And that, I love web design. I still love web design. I haven't kept up with it as much, so I don't think I could still do it these days back compared to, I don't even want to say how many years ago since I graduated high school, because the programming has changed so much on it. But I think if I was going back, I would definitely have started medical coding earlier and not kind of gone about it in this roundabout way where I'm like, I know about it. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get like 80% of the way done with a different degree and then go into medical coding. I think if I was starting over, I might actually go into an associate's degree program. I think the difference between the certificate programs that they have and the associate's degree program, it's really not a whole lot more. So I think I would probably, if I was starting back again, now that they have like a medical billing and coding associate's degree program, I would probably start there. It's as far as starting over, I think that would be my biggest one, is just kind of getting into it a little bit earlier. It's hard to say though, because, because of the timing that I had, I think really contributed to a lot of my success because I got into medical coding right when all those private practices were being bought up. So it was really like a good time to get into the industry because there was just this flourish of need for certified coders because so many private practices had been having, their practice manager or Susie who, they just brought in and were like, you're the billing person now, doing their billing and coding. And there was just so much going on that they didn't realize about the nuances about even like, I remember so many people confused about, and they still are, I guess, this day, it's about like 25 modifier. When do we add a 25 modifier? I was getting into big debates about if it could go on a procedure. They're like, yeah, put it on the procedure code. And it's just so many things that, we thought we could do back then in private practice. And then when we all kind of got together and put our heads together as far as billing and coding, realized, these are not correct things to do. So it's tough because I feel like, if I'd have started earlier in my career, would it have not been as good of a time? Would I have had that issue where I couldn't have gotten into an internship at that time, or I wouldn't have gotten the success that I had? Because another contributing factor to my success was I was still a CPCA and I got that tech school position in the evening. So would that have been something I would have been able to do? Maybe I would have gone into a completely different section at that time. So I could have easily maybe been one of those people who, got into medical coding and couldn't find a job right away. But I had that benefit of the really good timing. So it's a tough decision to say. But yeah, I think overall, I wish I'd have done it earlier. But I do kind of think to myself, like, if I had, like, what would the path have looked like for Victoria? Would I have been further ahead, or would I have been the victim of just poor timing at that time?
Yeah, I think we all have that question of the road not taken, the path not taken, on the timing of things or certain opportunities for sure. So, Tony, if you could go back and do it all over again, what would you do differently? Let's get a little bit more specific. Like, if there was something you could do differently to maybe achieve success more quickly or more easily. Obviously, we have the benefit of what we know now. So it's kind of like going back in time and talking to your younger self and saying, hey, this is what's coming up ahead, and this is, what you should choose to do to help yourself, kind of advance, much quicker. Although you pretty much worked your way up the ranks pretty darn quickly. You had high positions at a very young age, just like I did. So what would you do differently? Would you just go out and try to be an entrepreneur sooner? Is there anything you would do differently?
Yeah, Stacy. So yes, that's exactly what I would do. I would have started my business years sooner. I regret not taking the leap of faith sooner. And when I think about it in hindsight, timing is everything. And it just wasn't obviously the right time and the right season for me to go all in with the business, but I would definitely have started it sooner. I would always look at people that had businesses and I would think, okay, they have something that I don't have. Like, they've got a master's degree, so I need to have a master's degree, to be successful. I would always look at people and think, okay, they have this credential or they have, this thing about them that affords them the ability to take a risk and go out on their own, or, step into that role for a promotion. And so I would always kind of do this comparison. And so I think that is something that held me back for a while. I've always been a very confident person, and I've always known that I would be successful. But I didn't feel like I believed enough in myself to start my business sooner. So I would say to my younger self, don't be afraid to take risks, because risks are the key to success. Without risk, there are no rewards. But you've got to be willing to take the risk. And it is a risk, right? There's a huge risk involved with starting your own business. You can absolutely fail, and people do all the time, every single day. Victoria has said this before, but I always knew that if I needed to go get a job, I could, right? I always had a fallback. I could always be a contract coder. I could always, be a contract consultant. But I didn't want to take that route. I really wanted to be able to build something from the ground up. And it's been such an incredible journey, and I'm so glad that I did it. But I do think about, I should have done it a few years sooner. When I started my business, I had two very young kids. And that was challenging, Having young kids is challenging in and of itself. Having a business is like having another child. You literally have to grow it from infancy, and it takes constant dedication and time, and there's always something to do. So, I kind of had my third baby before I actually had my third baby, because it was Alpha Coding Experts. So if I had done it before I had kids, I feel like my journey would have been a little bit different. There's a lot of regret I have with my son and with my daughter, and not being as involved or around and present in the early parts of their life that, I think about all the time. And when I had my third child, my daughter, I was so grateful because I worked for myself, and I had the advantage of being able to, really focus on what was most important in that season of my life. When I worked in corporate, that was not the main focus, unfortunately. And so there's a lot of regret that I have from that. A lot of things that I didn't get to participate in with my kids because I was, building a business, running a department, constantly on the road, traveling here, there, and everywhere. Because, in the grand scheme of things, I knew that it would pay off. But at the time, I lost a lot of the little moments with my kids. And so I regret that. I have a lot of regret for that. And I think if I had started my business earlier, I would have avoided some of that regret. So if I had to go back in time, I probably would have started my business 2 or 3 years before I actually did. I would also say that don't be so hard on yourself. I am really hard on myself, more hard on myself than anybody could ever be. I'm my own worst critic. And I think we all kind of share that, in that we're the ones that set the bar for ourselves. And so I always knew, there's nobody that's going to motivate me more than myself. I'm just intrinsically motivated to be successful. So don't be hard on yourself when you have failures and setbacks and things don't go exactly like you think that they should, because, we talked about this in a previous episode. It all works out the way that it's supposed to in the grand scheme of things. And we grow through what we go through. So you have to have those setbacks. You have to have those challenges to be able to move forward. So if I could do it all over again, I'd definitely start my business sooner.
Yeah, I think I can echo that I would probably want to go out on my own sooner. It was always that risk, and that, what do I do if I give up that guaranteed paycheck? That was always my fear, because I didn't have anybody else to fall back on. I am my only source of income. If I'm not making the money to pay the bills, then the bills aren't going to be paid. And I didn't have any type of safety net. So it really kept me working for others much longer than I would have liked to, because I think I'd be further along than what I was. It's unfortunate that when I did go out fully on my own, I was only solo for, I don't know, not quite, I'm trying to think, maybe a year and a half, a little bit more, before I started having my health issues, and that kind of derailed what I had been doing. And I feel like if I had been better established before then, and had been working on the business and having a growing business prior to that, when I came out of that, things would have been different, and maybe I would have continued to grow my company in the way that it had been growing rather than pivoting. But just, again, life circumstances caused me to pivot. And, I think back sometimes about, missed opportunities, opportunities that are presented, and things that you say no to, and why you say no to them. And, now that I have all these years of experience, behind me, and I look back on things, and I'm way short of where I wanted to be at this age. I'm nowhere close. Some of it is, just life happens and you don't have any control over it. That's part of it. But then there are other things that we do have control over, again, with missed opportunities. So when I was working at the one company, the radiology billing and consulting company, this was where I was before I went out on my own. I was a partner in that company. And at that time, the other partner, he knew that I wanted to start a separate education company. And I was having trouble making a go of that, because I needed people to come on board and create content and help me build this. And I didn't have the money to pay people. I was asking people, hey, come on board. You're going to work for free now, but it's going to pay off down the road. And a lot of people don't want to do that and take the risks. They don't want to invest the time in it, which I get. You want to be paid for your time. And so he came, to me and he said, you know what? He's like, I believe in this. He's like, I know you can be successful with it. He's like, I'm willing to put up any money that you need to get it going. He's like, I just want 25% of the business. That's it. And I'm a silent partner, and whatever money you need to make this happen, he's like, I can make sure that you have that. And so I was like, well, okay. I'm like, well, how long do you want 25% of the business for? And he said, forever. And I said, well, that's not going to work for me. I don't want somebody having 25% of my company, forever. That seemed I felt like that was a little bit, much. I'm like, well, I have no problem with you making a great return on your investment, but I don't want, this to be something where you have 25% of all the profits, forever for the life of the company. And that is why I said no to that. And then over the years, as time is going by, and then I never did anything with that idea, I look back on that and I'm like, how short-sighted was I? And it's funny because, I watch Shark Tank. I'm a fan of that. And you ladies probably watch it too. And I'm yelling at the TV, like with these people when they want to like nickel and dime the sharks. I'm like, you idiots, what's wrong with you? I'm like, why are you doing this over a few percentage points? Because I'm like, you know what? I'm like, if you don't make anything, then your higher percentage isn't worth anything. So I came, to the realization on my own that, okay, Stacy, 100% of, nothing is nothing, but 75% of something is something. So I really shot myself in the foot, on that opportunity. And I've thought about, over the years, that business kind of going back and trying to make a go of it again. But just, I think timing is everything. And I think that the window kind of closed on that because this would have been back in like 2007, like around there. 2006, 2007, I wanted to do it. And now the market is so saturated with so many things. My concept is not new. It's not novel. Could I do it better with the right group of people? Maybe, but there's so much competition. I don't think it would ever grow to the level that it could have. And if I would have done it back then and I would have taken the investment and I would have given 25%, I believe we could have built that business to a multi-million-dollar company and then possibly sold it, because that was always my goal of what I wanted to do. And so that, if I could rewind the hands of time, I would definitely take him up on his offer and then run with it and build that other business.
That's really cool to hear that story.
Well, not really. It's a missed opportunity. How cool is a missed opportunity? Come on.
No, it's cool because you think about it now and you're like, what if, and
Yeah.
I'm yelling at them too. Like, it's Mark Cuban. Like, what are you doing? Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, this is not 100% work related, but I'm only recently coming into realizing how much finances and budgeting and planning ahead and retirement is going to, the importance of that. And gosh, do I wish I'd have done that a while ago. So this is a bad confession I'm about to make. After I left my first coding position or first healthcare position, I cashed out my retirement to pay for my first wedding.
And I think we can safely say that was not a good investment. Okay. Yeah.
That was not a good one. I think the money I would have even just now from interest from that was definitely worth more than my first marriage.
Hindsight was definitely 2020.
Yeah. So no, I can, so about the retirement thing and all of that. So I am nowhere close to where I need to be retirement wise, as far as taking care of that. That's something that's becoming more of a priority, given that I'm, I'll be 48 next week. So I need to really start thinking about that and focusing on that. It's been something, I'm one of those people, I'm not good at planning. This is what I'm telling on myself. I'm not good at long-term planning, and I'm not good at delayed gratification. That is like not me. I am like more like live in the moment, like what's in front of me today, like make a decision there.
Buy the shoes.
Obviously, exactly. If I had taken the money I spent on shoes and purses and other things and invested it, I would be much better off than having on. I will be a fabulous looking old person. Okay. Let's just say that I will be the hottest senior citizen that there is. I might not have a ton of money in the bank, but I'll be looking good. Okay. With my shoes and all my fancy stuff.
You'll finally find the man at the retirement home, and and that's when
Maybe
you're
at
gonna
like that
catch
point
the
in time.
millionaire.
But so that's something, I mean, it relates to professional, but it also relates to personal. Like one regret that I have is that I got into debt like very young and I carried a lot of debt for a lot of years and that just like bogged me down. And then getting into business like on my own, like initially, it was really slow. And then there's like more debt that accumulates and then business is good. And then business was in the crapper for 3 years and then more debt accumulates. And it was, and then I had IRS issues because when the money's up, it was just a big like nightmare. And I fixed most of those problems. But when you look back on that, you're like, I think about all the money I have made over my career. And it makes me sick to think of all the money that I've made and how few assets I have based on the amount of money that I have made. I should, if I had been smarter about things, I should be a millionaire many times over, but I'm not. And a lot of that started from things you kind of set the stage when you're really young. If you start down that path of debt and you're doing that in your 20s, it kind of just is like that, you just wear it. It's like that weight like on you that you can't seem to escape. And so I'm at the point where I'm as close to being debt free as I've ever been. That's going to occur within the next year. I'm absolutely thrilled about that. But that's just something that follows you and it dogs you. And that's why these people who have these huge student loans on top of everything else, I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you even bear the burden of something like that on top of everything else that you would get into debt for? So that's just something on the personal side. That would be my number one piece of advice to people is stay out of debt. Don't go there. You don't need it. I mean, in my 20s, I'm like, oh, I'm going to go out this week. Let me go buy a new $100 outfit to go out tonight. Oh, next week, I don't like anything in my closet. Let me go. I was that person and never thought beyond that. And then when you're in your 30s and you're still paying, on things because you spent all your 20s just partying and having a good time and living like a rock star when you don't make a rock star salary, it's a little bit of a problem. And it takes you years because again, when you're in business for yourself, you have those ups and downs and those fluctuations. And so there were times where, when it was really slow, when it was lean, I'm like, I'm having to put groceries on a credit card. I mean, it was that bad, like at times. So that's the downside of being the business owner. So yeah, personally, professionally, avoid debt. Don't pull debt going into business. That's one thing. I've never had a lot of debt on the business, which is good. But that's probably my biggest regret on the personal side there, which affects business, unfortunately, when you make those decisions. So yeah, Tony just sitting there like, so Tony, you're like much younger. You're the youngest of all of us. So you can, benefit from like this, like right now, but I'm sure you're very wise and you plan for like all of that. So I'm sure you're all good.
Well, I'm certainly not perfect, but we'll have those times where we like to go out and party and think about the consequences later, right? That's what your 20s are for.
Sometimes there are just certain things you have to do. I mean, I'm much more responsible than I used to be. I'll say that, but I still like to splurge and like do things. Like, did I need another pair of shoes? No, but I like shoes. That's like my thing. Like when people get on me for like the shoes, I'm like, okay, I look at it this way. Some people like to travel the world and go on exotic vacations and, go to all these foreign countries. That's their priority. I have zero desire to do that. I'd rather sit in Florida and just, stock up on shoes and build my shoe collection. That to me is more enjoyable than going overseas and traveling. So we all have our little, things. So anyway, should we do shoe and tell? We're on the topic of shoes.
Oh, yeah.
We're
on the topic.
Go ahead.
Before we can go on. Okay. So again, I went back to the Steve Madden store and I ended up getting 2 pairs of Steve Maddens again, because guess what? They had another half price sale. And so I got them in this nice, pretty pink color. And I got them in the silver color. And so that's twice now in the Steve Madden store. I've gotten $30 pairs there, which like never happened. So my sparkle collection still continues to grow. I never should have walked in the store. I like know better. Like I don't need anything, but when I go in, if it sparkles, I have to have it. So
she can't help herself.
I know. That's and when they're so cheap, you have to buy them in both colors. There's like no other like option. When I can't decide, that's like what I do. Like with anything, just let me get 2 of them. But again, I could be a multi-millionaire if I wasn't so free.
So I have to tell you that just reminded me of something. I went out to the outlets a couple of weeks ago and they have a Crocs store there. And I previously said I can't fit into Crocs. Well, apparently if I go up a size, I can. So I bought myself a pair of sparkly Crocs. And I was thinking about you, Stacy, as I'm getting them.
They
I'm like, here
have
I go. I got
sparkly
my bling
Crocs.
shoes.
Oh my God, Stacy's gonna have a heart attack thinking about Crocs right now. Like that's
No,
probably
okay,
the
no.
antithesis of what she wears.
Exactly. I mean, I'm shocked that they have like sparkly Crocs. I would never wear Crocs even if sparkly. That's just not
I
my
would totally
jam
rock those
at
Crocs.
all.
I wore them to HealthCon.
I think I saw a picture. Yeah, they were really cute. Yeah. I love it. Comfort
I
is
need
very
to see
important.
those. I definitely need to see what those look like. Because sometimes when I'm out shopping and I see that they put bling on something or they make it sparkly, I'm like, not everything needs. You just make it worse. Some certain things you make worse when you put bling on them and try to like make them flashy. I'm like, no, it just like doesn't go. So anyway, okay. So let's move on. So let's talk a little bit about those situations that we find ourselves in that are major disappointments. So can you share? So Tony, I'll start with you this time. Can you share an example of when a disappointing outcome or a disappointing situation actually worked out to your benefit, meaning that you were, disappointed in the moment, upset in the moment, but down the road, it actually turned out to be a good thing that that event occurred?
Yeah, life has a way of teaching you lots of lessons. And I've had lots of instances where it's the end of the world and my life is ending, right? That's what you think in the moment because you're so disappointed. But then it turns out that it was, the best thing that could have happened. So I've had so many moments throughout my life, where I've had that, where I'm grateful that, I was disappointed because it turned out to be something that ultimately was advantageous. So early on in my business, very early on in my business, I got involved with a mid-sized physician group. It was owned by two physician partners. And, in hindsight, I will not work with physician partners again, just because there's just too much drama. When you got two partners, it's like a marriage. It's a very interesting dynamic. So I was helping them build out their medical practice, scale some of their programs, onboard new physicians, basically acting as an interim chief operating officer. And so, this was a very involved role. I had to, do a lot of very sensitive, confidential things for them. And I had to facilitate a lot of complicated conversations and, all of the things that people don't want to talk about, uncomfortable things. Really, it was my job to come in and make sure that those things got addressed. So the two partners, one was like, the nicest guy. You would never know he was a physician. He was just so laid back, so chill, easygoing, super nice guy. I loved working with him. The other guy that was the partner, also a physician, but not a practicing physician, was a complete and total nut job. This guy was off his rocker. I mean, he would call me at 2 a.m. He would show up to meetings 2 hours late. He just was extremely disrespectful. He would come into a room, and I'm sure you guys have met people like this. He would suck the air right out of the room. It was just like awful to deal with him. He's like a cancer for the whole practice. And so I dreaded any time I had to deal with him. So the other partner was the opposite, very practical, easygoing, easy to deal with. So they were paying me a very sizable monthly retainer to advise them, to help them. And early on in my business, this was a client that I needed, right? It was something that I needed to keep the business afloat. And, this was a lot of money we were talking about. And after about 6 months of dealing with this chaos, we had a very important board meeting where we got all the physicians together and the board was there. And we had this meeting, and it was very important meeting. We had a long agenda, lots of things to do. And the partner that was, a reasonable human being was great. He was there, showed up on time. The partner that was crazy decided to show up to the meeting almost an hour late, and he was completely hammered. Like, I'm talking ripped. Like, you could smell the alcohol 10 miles away. He was belligerent. He was drooling on himself. He's probably like high on coke. Who knows what this guy was on? He was crazy. So yeah, that meeting did not go well. He ended up taking the table and like flipping it over and like just being a total complete ass. And so this was a point in time where I had to basically walk out of the room and say, you're fired. I don't want to work with you anymore. And it was so hard to do because my business really needed the revenue. It was a very difficult decision to make. But again, no amount of money is worth that kind of toxicity. And, I just wasn't going to be treated like that. So walked out of there, got rid of them, was done. A year later, it took a year. So that client goes away and I'm worried that, we're not going to get more clients. It's going to be the end of the business and, it's just going to be this big disaster. Of course, that didn't happen. We got busy, took the craziness out of the equation and more clients came and it was fine. Well, a year later, the partner that I really liked contacted me and said, I need to separate from this business. Like, I need to get out of this partnership. Can you help me? Can you help me? And I said, yeah, absolutely. So I connected him with the right team. We got attorneys, all of this whole thing so that they could separate the practice out and he could do his own thing. Well, that client turned out to be one of our best clients, turned out to be a very good friend. I was invited to the birth of, their kids, like parties, celebrations after they're born. I've been invited to family functions. Like this is a client that I absolutely adore. And he has referred so much business to us. He tells everybody about what we do. And he's just been an incredible, referral source for us and a friend. So that experience was awful. It was toxic. And in the moment, it was very, very important because, like I said, it was the beginning of our business and we really needed the revenue, but it taught me that no amount of toxicity or no amount of money is worth that level of toxicity. So great friends, one of our best clients, great referral source. Now that doctor tells everybody about our services and it was, a disaster in the moment, but turned out to be a great thing. So that's the story I wanted to share.
Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah, you probably have several. Like I think all of us probably have several, especially when you have your own business. There tend to be a lot of those stories that come with the territory. So Victoria, why don't you share a story of a disappointing outcome or situation that worked to your benefit?
Yeah. So, if it weren't for disappointment and bad situations, I don't think I would have gotten into medical coding to begin with. I had talked about how my position prior to medical coding was working in a call center. And I was friends with two girls there. I was in my early 20s, maybe mid 20s, early to mid 20s. And they thought I was cool. Like they just thought I was cool. And we were friends and we would send each other stupid emails during work. And we would go out to dinner and have drinks and have a good time. And one of them we knew was kind of going to leave because she was going for a teaching degree. The other one was working with me in an admin capacity. We were both kind of like administrators in the call center working on Excel spreadsheets and, administrative tasks. And she had told me at one point that she was planning on leaving. She was looking for other positions. And I was in some sort of planning meeting, I guess, and they had said something about her. And I said, oh, well, you probably shouldn't rely very heavily on this plan because what if she leaves? Well, I guess they must have somehow caught wind of this, developed a very hyperbole inflated situation of what happened, and decided that I was going around, that I was, troublemaker. I was, going behind their backs. I was a backstabber. And what had happened, I guess, was at the time, MySpace was very popular and it was new. We didn't know as well as we know now that you shouldn't be posting about your job and stuff on there. And I was, I guess, bitching about my job and my boss, thinking, oh, well, this is locked. Only my friends can see it. Well, after that went down, they copy and pasted some derogatory things I had said about my boss on my MySpace page and sent it to an email filter that went to everyone in the call center. I was dragged into human resources. They're like, Victoria, did you write this? And I'm like, well, you can't prove that I wrote it, just cocky and arrogant as anything. And they're like, well, did you write it? And I'm like, well, I'm not saying if I did or didn't, because you can't prove that I wrote that. And they're like, well, we know you did. So pack up all of your stuff and get the hell out. So obviously some very strong mistakes made there. Since then, I've had a very healthy amount of caution befriending anyone at work, which was difficult through a lot of my career because there were some people there that were very nice and I probably should have befriended or been a little bit more warmer to, or invited them into kind of my personal world a little bit more. And I've always held my cards very close to my heart. So that has held me back a little bit. In some cases it is better to kind of separate your business and personal lives, but it's only recently that I think I've been a little bit more open towards that because I have more people now that aren't quite colleagues or I guess fellow coworkers. They're more so colleagues. They're people that I know that work in the industry, but they're not going to go and I work for myself. Who am I going to get fired from right now? But if that hadn't happened, and it was so devastating at the time, the way I was just like so unceremoniously just like removed from my job, I was crying, and that was the breaking point. That was the point where I went, I need something with job security. I need something that's a little bit more specialized. And then I went into school finally for medical coding. So that was my pivotal point where I finally was able to make that career move and get into the field itself.
Yeah, that's a great story. That happens with a lot of people. Like over the years, all the people I've talked to, it's like they think that getting fired is like the worst thing in the world, and it's so devastating, especially when it's unexpected, and it just like comes and it drops in their lap. But then it leads to other opportunities, doing something new, stepping out and doing things that they haven't done. We even saw that during COVID, where people were, pivoting and doing things differently. And if COVID hadn't happened, then a lot of people wouldn't have the businesses that they have today. Victoria, that's when you started your YouTube channel and that became, wildly successful. So through those awful things, COVID was not fun for like anybody. That was truly horrible. And, over 2 years later, 2.5 years later, we're still dealing, with this problem. But, a lot of good actually came out of that. I know during COVID, I had an amazing year. I had one of my most successful years with the online course, during that time. It's not doing as good this year as it has the past 2 years. I believe a lot of that's due to inflation and people are tightening their belts and not spending money on extra things. So I get that. But yeah, it's and so many entrepreneurs were like born, during that time. When they talk about people not going back into positions like, oh, we can't find people to work in this industry or that industry, we see that they're short staffed. Well, I'm like, those people found other ways to make money. I'm like, I think that's a lot of what it comes down to, where they're like, you know what, I can do something else to make money. I don't have to be this paycheck person. I think a lot more people are independently employed, that they're self-employed. And, when we talk about low unemployment and all that, and I'm like, and there's the labor, they say the labor force, is smaller than it's ever been. It's the smallest it's been in years. And I'm like, well, are you counting self-employed people who are making that money that they turned a side hustle into something? They're not a corporation, maybe they're not incorporated, like we are, but they found a way to like make money. I think that's why we're seeing a lot of the issues that we do. I don't think that people are sitting on their ass collecting checks like everybody wants you to believe. In some cases that may be, but I think there are so many more reasons why that's occurring there. So for me, I would say, early on, I had something happen to me that I felt that like was a betrayal, a very personal betrayal that like upset me like quite a bit. So I had been working in a hospital medical records department while I was going to school. And so I worked at this hospital for 6 years. I was there before I started school, and then I was there when I finished school. And then after I finished school, I started looking for other job opportunities because I felt that there wasn't anywhere for me to advance in that facility, because my boss, the only position for me to move up into would have been my boss's position. And if she's not going anywhere, then there's nothing for me there. So I was like looking elsewhere. So I initially saw myself taking the more traditional HIM path, becoming, maybe an HIM manager and then a director. That was kind of what I thought I would do when I came out of school, because that's what the program was geared towards at that time. And so when I graduated, I started looking for jobs. I did have job offers for different HIM manager positions, assistant director positions that I turned down for different reasons, and I didn't, take them. And then eventually I did get offered a job, as a revenue analyst. So going into revenue cycle, like the reimbursement and like compliance and things like that. And so I decided I wanted to take that opportunity. It was a $10,000 pay increase. It was something a little bit different. And I always like to get in. I like to be challenged and do different things. So I decided that I was going to, give my notice and then take that job. Well, when I gave my notice, my boss had said to me, well, do you want to stay on per diem so I can use you? We can kind of keep you. And at first I agreed, but then what happened was, by doing that, they weren't going to pay me my PTO. So you're still technically on the payroll. So they're still going to hold that, and I don't get my payout. And I wanted my payout to be able to pay off my car. That was my plan, to use that money for that. So I'm like, no, I'm just going to resign. I'm not going to do per diem because I want the money. That was the reason why I made the decision for that money. So I could cash that out and I could take it and I could use it for that purpose. So then over the course, I don't think it was quite a year, it was less than a year. She actually ended up resigning, leaving that job. And now that position, her position was open. She had known that she was going to be leaving, and she never told me that she was going to be leaving. So that, because we had such a good relationship and such a close relationship, I felt that and this was when I was in the new job that I hated. I was miserable in this job. I didn't like it at all, and I wanted out. And then she's leaving, and I'm like, if I had known this, I would have stayed. If only she had told me. I wouldn't have told anybody. I would have kept it in confidence, but I would have stayed there. I would have stepped into her job, and I would be a director, and I would be really happy. And so I was very upset about that. So one of my classmates who had gone to school with me, I think she was a year behind me, she had come into that hospital after she finished her program, and she came in as a coder. There was a position that opened up that I didn't want, and then she came into that position. And then she ended up, with not working there that long and only, doing the coding, she ended up getting promoted into that position, internally. And so that did not sit well with me at all, the fact that that went down like that. And I was really upset about it. And I'm like, gosh, how can somebody that was so good to me for so long, and we were pretty tight, that she would betray me like that? So at the time, I felt that that was awful, that I had been screwed out of that opportunity, and I was really upset about it and didn't think I would get over it. But fast forward, several years later, getting into radiology and then becoming a compliance officer and working in that capacity, and then starting to get into consulting. When I look back on that now, if that hadn't gone down the way that it did, I would not have taken the path that I ended up taking. I would have been in that traditional role, in that friggin' rut, working in a hospital system as, a director, possibly higher, but dealing with putting in those 40-hour weeks, 50-hour weeks, having that pressure, having that stress on me, and being in that corporate structure, which I can't even stand the thought of being in that structure. So I feel like it worked out the way that it was supposed to. So the fact that I didn't know about that worked to my benefit, because it would have affected my decision at the time. And then eventually, when I was looking for a job in the future, I ended up interviewing with her at another facility she was at for a job opening that she had. And that's just because I found myself in a situation where I need a job somewhere. And I was looking around, just trying to find a paycheck at the time. So I interviewed with her, and I ended up not working there. I ended up going and doing something else. But it was kind of interesting that it came a little bit full circle. But again, it hurt me so badly. But looking at it now, I'm glad that happened the way it did. And then the person who got that job, I'm actually still friendly with her. I saw her at the FHIMA conference, and we were talking about the history and, you know, how she came into the organization and how she got that position. And now she's worked her way up at a very high executive level in the HIM world. And she's been very successful, and she's very happy. I'm very successful, and I'm very happy. So it worked out for the both of us, I believe, the way that it should, even though for me, I felt like I got the, pardon my French, the shit end of the stick on that situation. But it actually turned out for my betterment. You know, I would never be where I am now if not for that happening to me. So that was a pivotal moment in my life. So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, how do you go about making difficult decisions? Because we all are, I know many times I've been faced with, okay, I'm at this crossroads. I can choose path A or I can choose path B. And I don't exactly know what the heck to take. Like, we can all do our pros and cons. We can make our lists. You know, how do you go about making those big decisions that, I mean, we're talking like life-changing potentially decisions? Is there a particular process that you follow? You know, what's your top advice to our listeners if they find themselves right now facing a difficult decision that they need to make in choosing plan A or plan B? So Victoria, I'll start with you.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, yeah, I'm a big fan of the traditional ones, making your pros and cons list. I think one of the best advice pieces I can give is, you know, as much as you want to hear other people's thoughts or opinions, because they might have different experiences or inputs than you have thought of, or different perspectives that maybe you haven't thought of, you know, you have to remember that it's your life. Very few people go to their grave wishing that they'd have worked more hours, or that they've impressed, you know, someone else with something, you know, an additional credential, or that they switched their jobs. You know, think about that aspect. And I know it's kind of morbid, but like, if I die tomorrow, like, what decision will I have felt more comfortable with? You know, I always say, maybe this is not a career related example, but like, I spend a lot of money on vacation. I also have horrid looking kitchen cabinets that I need replace. But if I die in a couple of weeks, what am I going to feel better about, having gone on vacation, or the fact that I have pretty kitchen cabinets? I'll feel better about the fact that I went on vacation. The kitchen cabinets will get done eventually, but they're not at the top of the priority list, because in the grand scheme of things, it's better to have had the vacation for myself or with my daughter, or, you know, relaxed a little bit more. So, you know, not everyone wants to go as that extreme. So if you're someone who likes the pros versus the cons list, just don't invest too much of your thought process into what other people are going to think. Because I'll tell you, there's a lot of people in this industry that wanted me to go traditional routes. They wanted me to become the director. They wanted me to become, you know, the top, you know, coding guru, or sit on all kinds of committees with the CPT advisory board. And it's not for me. And if I'd have gone down that path, I would have not helped, what am I at, 75,000 people now with medical coding questions and career questions. And I think that's been a lot more fulfilling and enriching than, you know, managing a coding department.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, great advice. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, we all like to seek advice. I mean, I actually prefer to give advice rather than follow advice. That's just me. I've always been that way. I tell people, I said, if I followed my own advice, I would be so much better off in so many ways if I followed my own advice. I give amazing advice, but I usually ignore it for myself. So that's just kind of like being honest, you know, there about, you know, that. So yeah, that's, you know, a lot of people have a lot of things to say. They have a lot of thoughts and opinions. And I can speak from my experience. If I found myself in a situation where I'm taking advice from a lot of people, even if all of those people are like in agreement, like with each other, I may not necessarily agree with what they're saying. I'm okay with like going against what 5 people are saying I should do, because what I've had happen sometimes is I will go with what people are telling me, and I will follow their advice, and then I regret it. I absolutely regret it, and I wished I had never done it. And I'm much more comfortable with making a wrong choice that is mine and mine alone than making a wrong choice that other people convinced me to make. It sucks to make a wrong choice, but I can live with it if it was my choice and I wasn't influenced by other people to make the choice. So Tony, so what is your top tip for making difficult decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything that you both said is important and true. I think that my top tip would be, don't make decisions based on emotions. You really should not do that, because your emotions, they ignite something in you. It's not a reasonable place to be. You're not going to be able to rationalize things in the same way when you're all hyped up on emotions. So don't make decisions based out of emotion. Really think about what the pros and cons are. I like to do the cost benefit analysis. How much is this going to cost me as far as money, time, and what am I going to gain from that experience? I think that that's super, super important, and so much easier said than done, right? When you get all hyped up and charged up, you might get into that state of just impulsively making decisions. And I know I'm guilty of that. And anytime that I do that, I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is a recipe for disaster. Emotions can be very powerful. I will also say, with difficult decisions, like if you're in a crossroads, if you're really trying to figure out what's the next step, where can I go from here? Really look deep inside yourself and identify what is most important to you and your family. I'm going to say that again. What's most important to you and your family? Because when you strip away all the noise and you think about, who's going to say what, and what's this person going to think? And I remember when, it's just like the most ridiculous thing, but I remember when I was the director at my job and I had all this responsibility and all these people that were constantly relying on me and all these providers that needed me, I would say, how are they going to find somebody to replace me? They need me. And that's just the most ridiculous thing, because any business they're not worried about you. They're worried about their bottom line. So like that job is going to replace you, faster than your obituary gets published. I think I've seen that somewhere where it's like you are very important, right? You obviously play a role, but in the grand scheme of things, how important are you really? So, I think about those types of things. What season are you in your life, and how does that play into this decision? I shared with you guys, I have a lot of regret about not being around with my young babies, my kids. And I think about that, and the price of regret is so heavy. I think about those things and it really weighs on me. So the price of regret is much higher than any temporary gratification, any raise, any promotion, anything that, if you're in a toxic environment, they give you to try to keep you around. So Victoria said this before, Stacy said this before, the day that you decide to stop caring about what other people think is the day that you are free. You don't have to be weighed down by what other people are going to think about your decisions, because other people's decisions, other people's opinions do not pay your bills. You cannot pay your bills with other people's opinions. So really dig deep inside and think about what's best for you, what's best for your family, what season are you in your life. And once you do that, you're going to identify what's most important, and then make sure you take action. It is so easy to just sit there and do the analysis paralysis and, be complacent and not take action. Complacency is the enemy of progress. You have to take action. So once you think about what's most important to you, you've identified it, take action. Take the risk if it's something that is risk. There's lots of risks out there that people are afraid to take, but like Victoria said, when you get to that last day and you're dying, you're taking those last breaths, you're going to be hit with all those regrets and all those things that you didn't do. And if I had done this, this would have been differently. And it's horrible. It's a horrible feeling. So stop and ask yourself, is this decision going to bring me closer to my goals, or is it going to take me further away? And that is, truly something that I try to live by.
You kind of like took my advice. Like, I feel like we were thinking like similarly, like there. So obviously like emotions, that is like huge. So when I was younger in particular, like emotions like running high, like all the time, like very impulsive decision maker. As I've gotten older, I have done better at taking the emotion out of things, kind of stepping back from situations and thinking something through before I react or before I make a decision, which has been very helpful, just to do, that. And again, I think that just comes like with age. So I take more time to make decisions where, I'm not that person who gets stuck in like that analysis and doesn't do anything. I'm like, just make a decision already. And even if it's a wrong one, now you know what doesn't work. You've like learned something from your mistake. And so in hindsight, I probably have made, many impulsive decisions, particularly financial decisions, like impulsively, like going back to things you would do differently. Like I can remember when I first moved out on my own, I just did that on a whim one day. I went and looked at apartments and signed a lease and went home and told my parents, hey, I'm out of here. I got my own place. Did that make financial sense? Could I really afford it? Was that a smart idea? No, because I had to go into debt to furnish the thing and buy stuff for it. And then when I'm out on my own and paying, that started the whole debt snowball thing, when you're out on your own. So that was not a good, but it was an emotional decision. I made it in a matter of hours, and I should have just stayed home and saved money and set a good foundation. And I didn't, that's just one example, of finances there. And now I think about, spending money. Like I think about when I spend money on shoes, I don't really think about it. I do it. That's still impulsive. I'm not going to lie. That's the one thing where I still haven't cured the impulses there. But I take a step back and I think about things, particularly if something's going to cost me like a lot of money. So I'll share this publicly. Tony already knows I had this discussion already where I contacted a matchmaking service because I wanted to learn more about their, she's laughing because she's like, I can't believe you're talking about this on the podcast, because I wanted to learn more about their services and just get an idea of what they do, what I could expect, and then also how much they charge, because they don't post that information on the website. So I just wanted basic info. Well, you can't get basic info. They got to put you through a 2-hour screening process before they'll even talk price, like with you, to weed out the undesirables. So I met their criteria. They said they would accept me. And then she's like, that will be $4,900. Which credit card would you like to put this on? And I was like, whoa. I'm like, I'm not doing this like right now. I'm like, this is like not happening. I'm like, that's a lot of money to make that, spur of the moment decision. And she was like for 30 minutes, like, poking at me to like do it and wanting me to pull the trigger. And I'm like, I said, that's $5,000. I can't make that decision right now. Oh, it's not 5,000. It's only 4,900. I'm like, seriously, did she just say that to me? That we're talking $100 difference here. I said, I am not going to make a decision on something with that big of a price tag this quickly. I said, not going to happen. And she was still going at me. And then she's like, I'm going to call you tomorrow and all that. And I'm like, no. Now, 10 years ago, I would have jumped on it, and I could pay cash for it now. It's not a problem. I've got more than enough money in the bank to pay the fee. But 10 years ago, I may not have, and I would have flipped $4,900 on a credit card and not thought twice about it, and I would have like gone for it. So that's just like one example. As much as I want to do that, and I want to outsource that process to someone because I haven't done a very good job myself. When you work from home, it's very hard to meet people. That's a challenge. And I'm in a female-dominated industry, so that doesn't help me. So I want to outsource that. So I'm like, okay, now I know how much it's going to cost. I need to work it into a plan. And she called me yesterday and left me a message. And I'm like, okay, so we're going to be going through this process for a while. So anyway, so it's kind of like a side note there, but I think it illustrates the point. And then, like you said, goals. What do you want? You need to be clear on your vision and your goals, because when you're when you're evaluating something, you want to ask yourself, like Tony said, does it move me closer to where I want to be, or is it going to take me further away from where I want to be? And that's how you have to evaluate decisions. When you're younger, you're not necessarily thinking about that. I never did. Like I said, I was more live in the moment. What's going to make me happy today and feel good today? And now, being, that I'm coming out, I would say I'm officially past the middle age. I've passed the middle age mark. I'm in the second half, here. I mean, if I live to be 100, I'm halfway through. I don't think that's going to happen. But you just look at things like so differently. And you're like, gosh, I wish I had this wisdom back in my 20s. I probably would have chosen differently and prioritized differently, because priorities change. And you always want to make sure that you stay focused on your priorities for sure. So ladies, any final thoughts that you want to share? Do you want to give me advice on whether or not I should sign up with the matchmaker?
I don't know. Yeah, that seems a little rich for a matchmaking service. I mean, how much are the traditional online ones these days? Aren't they still only like $30 a month or something?
Well, that's a dating app versus a matchmaker. Like they assign you a personal matchmaker that gets to know you.
Like on reality TV?
And they only well, I'm not on reality TV, but yeah, they assign you your person. You do video meetings with them. They learn about you. You give them all your criteria. They match you up. And part of the reason why the fee is high is because it weeds out like those people who aren't serious. That's kind of, why that's there. And I get it because I'm like, that will clear the field of people that I don't need to even deal with, especially given my history with men. It will eliminate all of the types that I've dated in the past. It'll clear them out like right there. So it was a little bit higher than I expected, like for sure. It was a very interesting conversation that I had with her for 2 hours, like going through everything. But yeah, it's a personalized service, and that's for a 12-month membership, so that's 1 year, and they guarantee you 24 dates in 12 months. So that's actually not bad to give you 24 in 12 months. But yeah, it's when you don't know what it's going to cost, and hey, whip out your credit card now and pay me. I'm like, no, I've got things that need to be done around the house. I have other financial priorities that are coming up this fall that are, above this right now, unfortunately. Oh, Tony, you have to have something to say. You have to.
Anything worth having requires investment. So who knows? You might find your Prince Charming.
I agree. I'm not opposed to doing it. It's just that night, the fact that she wanted me to like do that right then and there, I was like, absolutely not.
That's a little shady. Happening. It's like car salesman.
There's no free trial period. Like you can just get a free trial for 2 weeks and then they charge your credit card.
I need to know these outcomes. Like, what are the outcomes? What are the levels of success?
So, well, all they said is we've been in business over 30 years and we wouldn't still be in business if we weren't successful. Now, a friend of mine has a friend who used this service, and she ended up marrying a neurosurgeon using this service. So to me, I'm like, wow, that's a great story. That's why I called this company. I'm like, okay, if you have that caliber of people in your database, I'm like, we need to find me an interventional radiologist. I'm just saying.
You guys would be a dangerous combination.
I mean, come on. We could give a certain other doctor a run for his money. If I added that clinical doctor piece to my business, I'd be thrilled. So maybe I should do it just for that and say, match me with interventional radiologists if you have them. Forget about finding a love interest. Find me a business partner, right? That would be worth the $4,900 just for that. And then can I write it off? Can that be a business expense then if it's to look for maybe I could do that. What do you guys think? I'm not, not scared of it. Oh gosh. Okay. So, all right. So any final comments or words of wisdom that you want to share with our listeners, Tony?
Nothing that I haven't already said.
She's good. She's done. Oh gosh. All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode of Coding Consultant Confessions. And we'll be back in another 2 weeks with a brand new confession for you. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for tuning in to Coding Consultant Confessions with Tony Elholmes, Stacy Buck, and Victoria Mole. Unfiltered, unedited, unapologetic. Connect with the Coding Consultant Confessions podcast on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Simply search for Coding Consultant Confessions on any of these platforms to connect and engage with Tony, Stacy, and Victoria.